The conflict in Ukraine has entered its third, most dangerous phase, a strategic escalation that must be defined as the third battle for the light. This new epoch of warfare is characterized by Ukraine's decisive pivot to symmetric retaliation, directly targeting the stability and power grid of the Russian Federation. The era of Russia's unquestioned impunity is definitively over. This is FPV Explainer, where we break down the most fascinating stories in drone warfare, global affairs, and US domestic politics. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us what topic you want to see next. Your feedback shapes our future videos and keeps us bringing you clear, detailed analysis from the front lines. Also, please watch this video to the very end, even if you play it in the background without sound, as your continuous viewing is critical to help promote the truth about the war. The strategic goal of this campaign is not merely to disrupt operations, but to deliver on the promise of reciprocity, a clear message that terror tactics will be met with terror tactics. For months, the Russian army has pursued its own strategy of power neutralization, attempting to cripple Ukraine's energy system by hitting distribution nodes and power plants. Now, Ukraine is mirroring this doctrine with a brutal, accelerating effectiveness. The most critical evidence of this escalation is the surging intensity of strikes on Russian energy infrastructure. The number of attacks on thermal power plants and crucial substations has grown dramatically, with military analysts confirming that the rhythm of strikes is no longer sporadic, but sustained and intentional. The strategic objective behind this is immense: to engineer a blackout in Moscow and to systematically cut the capital's sprawling energy hub off from its vital power sources. This objective is achieved by targeting the maneuverable generation and distribution nodes. Ukraine is focusing its deep strikes on key 750 kilovolt substations and major power plants located hundreds of miles from the border. These targets are critical because they transmit vast amounts of electricity from major generation centers like the distant Volga hydroelectric power station cascade to the Moscow region, which is the nation's largest consumer of power. By isolating these nodes, Ukraine can disrupt the flow of maneuverable electricity, the power that stabilizes the grid during periods of peak consumption. The success of this strategy is confirmed by the resulting chaos in the periphery. The localized strikes on border regions have already caused blackouts and failures in water supply and essential city services. This serves as a visible daily humiliation, validating the new doctrine of an eye for an eye. The war has been successfully brought to the Russian home front, forcing Putin and his generals to confront the terrifying instability their own terror tactics have created. This campaign fundamentally changes the strategic calculus. The cost of continuing the war is now being measured not in Ukrainian sacrifice, but in the structural integrity of the Russian state itself.
We have established the strategic aim of the power strikes. Now we confront the campaign that has truly crippled the Russian war effort: the relentless, successful deep strike campaign against the nation's oil infrastructure. This is not just a military action. It is a profound financial operation that has directly cut into the Kremlin's budget, accelerating the economic insolvency of the state. The sheer scale and effectiveness of this campaign are a testament to the dedication and ingenuity of the Ukrainian forces. Since the start of the conflict, over 110 oil refineries, depots, and marine terminals have been targeted more than 250 times by Ukrainian drones and missiles. The impact of these strikes has been devastatingly precise and statistically significant. The strikes have succeeded in temporarily, or in many cases longer term, knocking out a staggering proportion of the nation's processing capacity, with estimates indicating that up to 40% of Russia's primary oil refining capacity has been taken offline. This is an unprecedented industrial shock that no major economy can withstand easily, especially one already reeling from international sanctions. This physical damage to the infrastructure immediately translates into a national economic crisis. The loss of refining capacity means the country cannot produce enough gasoline and diesel to meet domestic demand. This has triggered a massive fuel deficit that has been reported in 57 regions across the Russian Federation. This shortage is not just an inconvenience for civilians, it is a financial catastrophe. The resulting scarcity forces the government to impose administrative rationing and drives up wholesale prices, directly accelerating inflation across the entire economy. Crucially, the success of this deep strike campaign poses an existential financial threat to Putin's ability to wage war. The loss of refining capacity means Russia is forced to export crude oil at discounted rates, rather than highly profitable refined petroleum products. Refined products yield significantly higher profits and generate the crucial hard currency needed to import specialized components for the military-industrial complex. By attacking the refineries, Ukraine is effectively cutting the profit margin on every barrel of oil Russia sells, directly starving the war budget of indispensable foreign currency revenue. This sustained campaign is the most potent military application of economic warfare seen in recent history. It proves that Ukraine, through ingenious, low-cost drone technology, has developed a decisive capacity to inflict financial pain that is directly proportional to the immense cost of the war itself. The strikes are successfully converting military actions into economic insolvency, a strategic achievement that is accelerating the timeline toward Moscow's financial and military collapse.
We have analyzed the devastation inflicted by Ukrainian deep strikes. Now we must dissect the internal reasons why Russia is incapable of defending itself, a systemic failure rooted in military incompetence and bureaucratic sabotage. The Russian rear is not merely underprotected, it is structurally vulnerable due to the leadership's refusal to adapt to the realities of the drone war. The core issue is a shocking, criminal failure of defense planning. Critical infrastructure targets, the thermal power plants, electrical substations, and oil refineries are left absolutely defenseless. Unlike Ukraine, which learned the lesson of the first battle for the light and began constructing protective structures and anti-drone netting around its substations, Russian vital energy assets have been left exposed. This neglect confirms that the High Command fundamentally underestimated the long-term threat of Ukrainian deep strikes, prioritizing political optics and frontal operations over the security of the nation's energy foundation. This physical vulnerability is compounded by a profound air defense deficit. While Russia possesses advanced anti-air systems like the S-400 and the Pantsir, there are simply not enough of these systems to cover both the massive front line and the sprawling, thousands of miles long hinterland. Reports indicate that the supply of crucial short-range systems like the Pantsir has been critically depleted by the war, meaning the military lacks the necessary mobile, close-range defense capabilities to protect static civilian targets. The current strategy relies on the ineffective tactic of using high-value assets to defend against low-cost, disposable drones, a method that is both economically ruinous and strategically futile. Furthermore, the entire chain of command actively sabotages its own defense efforts. In a move of staggering incompetence, local authorities and military commanders resort to cutting internet and cellular service during confirmed drone attacks. Their rationale is that this will disable the incoming Ukrainian drones. However, this tactic is technologically outdated and fails to affect sophisticated Ukrainian systems. The real and immediate consequence of this action is that it paralyzes the coordination of Russia's own defense forces. Russia's mobile anti-drone fire groups and air defense units rely on cellular communication and digital maps for real-time coordination and targeting. By deliberately cutting the internet and phone services, the command structure blinds its own defenders, preventing them from communicating troop positions, sharing radar data, or coordinating fire. This act of bureaucratic idiocy functionally helps the Ukrainian drones reach their targets unimpeded, accelerating the chaos and destruction. This combination of exposed infrastructure, critical air defense shortages, and command-level self-sabotage confirms a military establishment that is structurally incapable of adapting to 21st century warfare. The structural rigidity and the failure to allocate resources correctly are proving to be as destructive to the Russian state as any external military strike.
The final and most crucial factor defining the inevitable outcome of this conflict is the rapid structural shift in offensive capability. Ukraine is building an indigenous arsenal of the future that guarantees it can sustain and escalate the deep strike campaign against Russia, regardless of potential fluctuations in Western aid. This is a technological and industrial victory forged by necessity. The transformation is evident in Ukraine's successful mastery and scaling of two crucial weapons systems. Firstly, the unmanned aerial systems. Ukraine has moved far beyond reliance on off-the-shelf commercial drones and is now mass-producing systems like the Firepoint FP1. These are low-cost, effective, long-range kamikaze drones capable of reaching targets up to 1,500 kilometers away. Their cost-effectiveness is the key strategic advantage. They can be manufactured quickly and deployed in swarms that overwhelm Russian air defenses, making the defense against them economically ruinous for Moscow. Secondly, Ukraine has achieved a critical breakthrough in indigenous missile technology. The military is actively scaling up production of the Neptune cruise missile for precise land attack, with a range of up to 1,000 kilometers. More significantly, they have introduced the Flamingo missile, a highly advanced jet-powered system with a potential range exceeding 3,000 kilometers. These weapons, which fly at low altitude and possess high terminal accuracy, are game changers. Their range puts strategic targets, including the vital Moscow region, under direct threat. This development fundamentally alters the strategic balance in two profound ways. First, it ensures technological and operational superiority. By developing its own cruise missiles and mass-producing drones, Ukraine is no longer dependent on the political timelines or inventory decisions of its allies. It has achieved self-sufficiency in deep strike capability, ensuring that the painful, sustained attacks on Russian infrastructure will continue and intensify. This capability removes Putin's ability to simply wait out the Western political cycle. Second, this indigenous production is an act of geopolitical power projection. It provides Ukraine with a credible, immediate response capability that strengthens its hand at any future negotiation table. When Ukrainian forces can hit strategic targets deep within Russia with domestically produced weapons, it demonstrates a commitment to self-defense that no external political pressure can undermine. The relentless technological pressure applying by these new systems ensures that the economic collapse and the manpower crisis we have analyzed will only accelerate, forcing the Kremlin to choose between its failing war and the complete structural disintegration of its power base.
We have meticulously analyzed the confluence of external pressure and indigenous military power. The final verdict on this escalating conflict is clear. The war has entered a phase of inevitable Russian exhaustion, and the coming winter is set to be the decisive strategic factor that compels Vladimir Putin toward a ceasefire. This outcome is assured because the Ukrainian strategy has successfully targeted the Russian state's single greatest internal vulnerability, the regime's profound fear of social and economic collapse. The effectiveness of the Ukrainian counter-campaign, the synchronized strikes on both fuel and electricity infrastructure, is not merely about inflicting damage, it is applying maximum coercive pressure where the regime is weakest. The devastating financial blow of the fuel crisis, coupled with the real threat of widespread winter blackouts, forces the costs of the war directly onto the Russian civilian population. This is the ultimate strategic maneuver.
The Ukrainian leadership correctly assesses that Putin, who has spent years suppressing dissent, is terrified of a social eruption more than he fears military defeat. This fear is well-founded. The Kremlin has consistently demonstrated its deep-seated reluctance to impose additional military burdens on its populace, evidenced by its refusal to authorize a new mass mobilization, despite the critical need for manpower. This political paralysis proves that the leader is acutely aware of the thinness of the social contract. Now, the economic and energy crises are doing what a military force alone could not. They are pushing that social contract to the breaking point. The reality of going without heat, light, and fuel in the harsh Russian winter, coupled with soaring inflation and job losses, is the precise trigger for the kind of internal unrest the security state is designed to prevent. The successful escalation of the Deep Strike campaign, backed by indigenous long-range cruise missiles and drones, guarantees that the chaos will continue throughout the winter months. Putin can no longer hide the war or its costs. The only means he has to restore order, placate the populace, and salvage the state's financial solvency is to immediately stop the aggression. This ceasefire will not be a diplomatic gesture. It will be an act of political necessity, a forced retreat to prevent a systemic domestic implosion. The cold, hard reality of winter, combined with the strategic brilliance of the Ukrainian counterstrikes, will force the leader to accept a temporary peace to save his own regime.